It happened during what was supposed to be a routine work trip, just another small town, another short stay, another job to complete. But by the end of those few nights, he would leave with something far worse than exhaustion. He would leave knowing that someone had been watching him. He worked in commercial refrigeration repair, traveling to different towns to fix walk-in freezers in grocery stores and restaurants. That fall, he was sent to a quiet town in northern Pennsylvania, the kind of place where everything shuts down early and the streets empty before night fully settles in. His company booked him into a small roadside motel on the edge of town. It was the only place available, a single-floor building with about a dozen rooms, all facing the parking lot. When he arrived a little after 7 p.m., the place felt almost empty, with only a few cars scattered around. The office smelled like old coffee and bleach. The woman at the desk seemed friendly but distracted. While checking him in, she kept glancing past him toward the parking lot, as if she was expecting something or someone. Before handing him the key, she gave him a strange warning. If anyone knocked on his door at night, he should not open it unless it was her or the owner. And if he heard anything outside, he should call the office and not get involved. She said it casually, as if it were normal advice, but it immediately felt off. He brushed it aside, assuming she was talking about drifters in the area. He was too tired to think much about it. His room was near the far end of the building, second to last. Inside, it was old but usable, with stained carpet and cigarette burns on the furniture. The kind of place you didn't look at too closely. Later that evening, as he returned from grabbing food, he noticed a dark green pickup truck parked 2 spaces away from his. The engine was running, but the headlights were off. Inside sat a man, completely still, with both hands on the wheel. He didn't look at him or react at all, which felt unnatural. He ignored it and went inside, locking the door behind him. At first, everything seemed normal. Around 10:30 p.m., he heard footsteps outside his room. That didn't bother him at first, since other guests were staying there. But then the footsteps stopped directly outside his door. He waited, expecting a knock or the sound of someone unlocking the neighboring room, but nothing happened. After a few seconds, the footsteps moved away, only to return again, slower this time, stopping outside his door once more. Still, there was no knock, just silence. He checked through the peephole, but no one was there. Around 11 p.m., a soft, controlled knock finally came. He stayed still and didn't respond. When he looked through the peephole again, the walkway was empty. That was when unease began to settle in. Near midnight, he heard a faint scraping sound at the door, like metal against metal. When he looked through the peephole again, he saw movement this time. Someone was crouched low, almost out of view, only the top of a dark cap and part of a shoulder visible. After a few seconds, the person stood up and walked away quickly. He immediately called the office. This time, the woman sounded more serious. She asked if he had opened the door, and when he said no, she told him to stay inside. A few minutes later, headlights passed across his window as someone checked the parking lot, then left. The office called back and said no one was there, suggesting it was probably someone messing around. But he didn't feel reassured. He barely slept that night, waking at every small sound. Around 5:15 a.m., he was jolted awake by the sound of his truck alarm. He looked outside carefully and saw a man standing by his truck with the door slightly open. Then the man turned and looked directly at his room, as if he knew he was being watched. After a moment, he shut the door and walked away into the darkness. That was when he called the police. They arrived, checked everything, and found nothing missing. One officer seemed skeptical, but another took his concerns more seriously. Before leaving, the older officer warned him not to open the door for anyone that night and to leave as soon as possible. Despite the warning, he stayed another night because of work. When he returned that evening, he saw the same dark green pickup truck again. It drove slowly through the lot before parking at the far end with its lights off. This time, he knew something was wrong. Later that night, the footsteps returned. Slow, deliberate, moving outside his room. Then came a soft tap on the window, followed by another, and then something dragging slowly down the glass. He lay still, pretending to sleep, fully aware that whoever was outside knew he was inside. Then he heard the bathroom window rattle. And worse, he heard the door of the room next to his open. He knew it had been empty. But now someone was inside, moving quietly. He called 911, whispering as he described what was happening. Then came a heavy on the wall between the rooms, as if someone was testing it. Moments later, the bathroom window in his room began to open slightly. He rushed over and forced it shut, feeling something push back from the other side before it stopped. Footsteps could now be heard outside his door, more than one person this time. Then came soft knocks, just like the night before. He didn't respond. He blocked the door and waited. When the police finally arrived, he heard multiple sets of footsteps running away. This time, the officers found evidence. The screen from his window had been removed, and there were pry marks on his truck and on the empty room next door. Later, one officer told him quietly that this wasn't random. There had been similar incidents involving men staying alone at that same motel. They were being watched, followed, and targeted. He packed immediately while officers stood outside. Before leaving, he checked under the bed and found a folded piece of paper. On it were his room number and his truck's license plate written down. That was the moment he realized the truth. He hadn't been chosen that night. He had been watched for days. He left the motel before 1 a.m. and drove for hours without stopping. And he never went back. Because sometimes, the most dangerous places aren't empty. They're watching, waiting, for the right person to arrive. It started like something harmless, just a swipe, a match, a name on a screen. At first, there was nothing unusual about it, nothing that suggested danger. That's what she believed in the beginning. It was October 2025 when she decided to download a dating app. She was single and curious, hoping to find someone to talk to, maybe even something meaningful. After a few swipes, she matched with a man named Killian. He replied almost instantly. What started as casual conversation quickly turned into constant messaging. They talked all day, every day. He was always there, always responding, always present. At first, it felt exciting and flattering. But within a few weeks, his behavior began to change. His tone shifted from friendly to controlling. He started saying things that made her uncomfortable, telling her that she belonged to him and that if he couldn't have her, no one could. He even threatened her, saying that if she blocked him, he would kill her. The strange part was that they were never even in a relationship. Despite that, he acted as if he owned her. Then, without warning, he disappeared. He unfriended her and cut off contact. She didn't question it too much and eventually moved on with her life. Weeks later, he came back. She received a notification that he had added her again. Remembering his threats, she accepted out of fear rather than interest. She didn't want to anger him. His first message seemed calm, almost affectionate. He told her he had been thinking about her smile for weeks. It felt unsettling, as if nothing bad had ever happened between them. She responded carefully, choosing her words to avoid triggering him. They started talking again, but this time she was responding out of fear. He behaved like a possessive partner, constantly asking where she was and who she was with. He kept asking her to turn on her location so he could track her. She refused because it made her uncomfortable, but the pressure remained. Then one night, everything changed. It was around 1 a.m. when her friend dropped her off near her home. She said goodbye and began walking alone through the alleyway. That's when she noticed a man standing in the dark. At first, she didn't think much of it. But then he called her name. She froze. She didn't recognize him immediately, but something felt wrong. Then she saw his face clearly. It was Killian. Before she could react, he grabbed her by the neck and slammed her head against the wall. The impact left her disoriented. He stared at her intensely, asking who she had been with and why she was out so late. His grip tightened around her throat. She struggled to breathe as tears filled her eyes. Panic took over her body as she realized how serious the situation was. She genuinely believed he was going to kill her. He threw her to the ground, and she gasped for air as she tried to recover. But he wasn't finished. He climbed on top of her and slapped her hard across the face. Then he started choking her again, even more forcefully than before. Her vision began to fade as she looked up at the dark sky, thinking about things she loved, as if preparing for the end. Suddenly, he stopped. He said he had to leave because the last bus was about to depart. Without another word, he ran away, disappearing into the night. She lay there on the cold ground, struggling to breathe and trying to process what had just happened. She attempted to call her best friend, but her voice was gone. She couldn't speak due to the damage to her throat. Her friend heard strange noises on the call and rushed to her immediately. Later, the police were contacted. She gave her statement, and the authorities took the situation seriously. They believed her life was in danger and provided her with a personal alarm and tracking device so she could alert them instantly if needed. Days later, she was followed again, this time by someone connected to Killian. It became clear that the danger had not passed. The police informed her that Killian's intention was to kill her. If he had more time that night, she likely wouldn't have survived. Now, every time she leaves her house, she feels like she is being watched. The fear never goes away. She constantly thinks about the possibility of him returning, waiting in the shadows, ready to strike again. She never gave him her address. She never shared her location. Yet somehow, he found her. And that is what terrifies her the most. It was supposed to be a peaceful escape, just a few quiet days in the mountains, away from stress, noise, and people. But sometimes, silence hides things you were never meant to hear. Mike had been feeling burnt out for weeks. Work had drained him, and the routine of daily life was becoming overwhelming. He decided to take a solo camping trip to the Smoky Mountains, something he had done before without any problems. Being alone in nature had always been something he enjoyed. The drive took most of the day. Long stretches of empty road slowly disconnected him from everything familiar. A couple of hours before reaching the mountains, he stopped at a small roadside diner. It was nearly empty, with only a few older people drinking coffee and a tired-looking waitress behind the counter. While eating his meal, he noticed a man sitting a few stools away. The man wasn't doing anything obvious, but he kept glancing in Mike's direction without fully turning his head. At first, Mike ignored it, assuming he just looked out of place. Eventually, the man asked where he was headed. Mike casually told him he was going camping in the mountains. The man nodded and told him to be careful out there. When Mike asked what he meant, the man simply shrugged and said it gets very quiet at night. The comment felt strange, but Mike didn't think much of it. He paid his bill and continued his drive. By late afternoon, he reached the trailhead. There were no other cars around, just a dirt pull-off leading into the woods. For most people, that would have been a warning sign, but Mike liked the idea of being alone. He grabbed his gear and started hiking. The trail took longer than expected, and by the time he found a clearing to set up camp, the daylight was already fading. He quickly set up his tent and built a small fire. At first, everything felt peaceful. The fire crackled, the wind moved gently through the trees, and insects filled the air with familiar sounds. Then he heard something different. Footsteps. They didn't sound like an animal. They sounded like a person walking through leaves. He looked up and saw a man standing between the trees about 30 or 40 feet away, facing him. Mike couldn't see his face clearly, but it was obvious he was watching. Mike called out, asking if he was okay. The man stepped slightly closer into the edge of the firelight and simply said hello. Mike asked if he was camping nearby, but instead of answering, the man asked if Mike was alone. That question made Mike uneasy. He hesitated before lying, saying his friends were on their way. The man nodded slowly, turned around, and walked back into the woods. Just before disappearing, he stopped and turned back toward the fire, standing still again as if watching from the darkness. Mike pretended not to notice, but his body felt tense. Eventually, the man disappeared completely. Mike stayed by the fire for a while longer, listening carefully for any other sounds. When nothing else happened, he put out the fire and went into his tent. He tried to convince himself that it was nothing, just another camper being curious. But he couldn't fully relax. About an hour later, he heard footsteps again. This time, they were much closer. He could hear them slowly moving around his campsite, circling his tent. The sound of leaves crunching made it clear someone was walking around him. Then the footsteps stopped right outside the tent. Everything went completely silent. Mike held his breath, afraid to move. Then he heard a slow exhale from just outside the tent, like someone standing inches away. He stayed completely still, pretending to be asleep. Every instinct told him not to make a sound. After a long time, the footsteps moved away again. But they came back. Again and again, throughout the night, the footsteps circled the tent, sometimes fading into the distance, then returning. At one point, it didn't sound like just one person anymore. It felt like there were multiple people moving around him. Mike didn't dare look. By the time the sky started to lighten, he realized he had been awake the entire night. As soon as there was enough light, he began packing as quickly as possible. His hands were shaking as he gathered his things. When he stepped out of the tent, he immediately heard multiple sets of footsteps running away through the woods. Not one, but several. That was when he knew he hadn't imagined anything. He grabbed what he could and hurried back toward the trail without fully packing. He expected someone to follow him, but no one did. When he reached his car, he locked the doors and sat there trying to calm down. Eventually, he fell asleep. When he woke up, the sun was high in the sky. Part of him tried to rationalize what had happened, convincing himself it might have been other campers. He decided to go back and retrieve the gear he had left behind. But when he reached the campsite, everything was gone. His tent, sleeping bag, and supplies had all disappeared. There was no sign of struggle, no trash, no damage. Just empty ground and the remains of his fire. It was as if he had never been there at all. He didn't search or try to understand what happened. He simply turned around and walked back to his car. He left immediately and drove home. He never reported it. And he has never gone camping alone again. Because sometimes, the most terrifying part isn't what you see. It's what stands just outside, in the dark, watching you all night.